on today's StoryBeat.
The best way you get anything out of a student or an actor is to let them know they know what they're doing. Give them that confidence. And if they're going offline or if they're going into a different realm that isn't working for the show, find what works. Say, I'm seeing what this is doing, and I think where you're headed, so that you're making the actor feel like they're a collaborative person, not that you're judging.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Lisa Barnes, has spent 2 tours of duty as an actress in New York. First, after graduating from the University of Southern California's theater department, she spent a number of years in the Big Apple. She acted in plays, Off-Broadway, and in regional theaters while studying with the legendary Stella Adler. As well, along with a favorite StoryBeat guest, Casey Childs, Lisa co-founded the renowned Off-Broadway theater company, Primary Stages. She subsequently headed to Los Angeles, where she performed in television and theater, winning numerous acting awards, including 2 Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle Awards. But in time, a stage show she did in L.A., directed by the late, great Orson Bean, moved to Off-Broadway, and Lisa then spent more than a decade in Gotham once again. Occasionally, when in New York, Lisa performs All of Us, a piece that she co-wrote via Zoom with 6 other New York actress writers during the 2-year COVID lockdown. Though she still resides in Hawaii, where she has acted, directed, taught, and scuba dived, she's currently living near Philadelphia to help her 92-year-old mom shop at Kohl's with her 30% off coupons. For the record, Lisa and I have been friends for more years than either of us will admit, having met while we were both in drama school at the University of Southern California. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a great joy for me to welcome my good friend, the extraordinarily multi-talented Lisa Barnes, to StoryBeat today. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was so lovely. And we just graduated in 2003, right?
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, I know. It seems, yeah. Yes, yeah.
It might be a couple of years more than that, but we're not going to let on. So,
okay.
All right. So let's go back in time for you, and look at your history just a little bit. You've been at the acting game for a while now, and I'm just wondering, at what age were you? How old were you when the bug first bit you?
When I was 6, and we were living in Ohio, and I would watch TV, like the Disney shows, and I'd look at the actresses that were my age, and I'd go, I'm not buying what they're doing. I'm just not buying it. I could do better. They weren't honest, and I knew there was something to it to be, authentic. And so I thought, I'd love to do that someday, but I'm in Ohio, so that'll never happen. And then we moved to California, where my dad was he was the agent for O.J. Simpson. And O.J. was was just starting out, had just graduated from SC, and my dad said, you've got to be an actor to have a career after this. And so O.J. was on an episode of Medical Center, and I remember watching it with my dad, and I was 12, and I was like, he can't act.
So, I saw that episode.
Did you?
Well, I saw that Medical Center.
Yeah. Remember?
I do.
And my dad said, well, you're going to tell him how great he is. So anyway, that's kind of where I just knew. And then I started in high school. And when I was 14, I started taking a drama class because I wanted to be interesting. I felt so. And so, but I really got into being able to express some of the sadness I was going through at that time. And I actually wrote in high school, and I did the festivals and all that, and I loved it so much. And it was like it became church to me right then.
Church. So you felt like at that point it was a calling for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And nobody else did. I mean, played like one role, the drunk actress, and you can't take it with you in high school. And then I did Oklahoma and, a South Pacific background, but that was it. And I insisted on studying and just becoming an actor, going to New York.
Were you a theater junkie? Were you a movie junkie? How did you,
Theater.
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 And so who did you admire then? Who did you look up to and say, wow, that is a really spectacular actress or actor, and I'd like to have a career like they have?
Well, I remember, not that in a million years I could have, but Julie Andrews was on a television show and she was talking about how every day she does a voice class and a dance class. And I thought, oh, that's exhausting. I could never do anything like that. And then, and then as I got older, because she was so wonderful and she was my idol when I was little, but it was honestly the kids at my high school. The drama department was written up in Variety because their shows were so good.
Wow.
And Fiddler on the Roof and David and Lisa and Comings and Goings. And it just blew my mind.
And so when you were in high school, you were really going at it.
Yeah.
You also have had a lot of training. Obviously, you went to school at USC and you did Stella Adler and all that. I assume you've done other training as well, yes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, throughout the years. So many. And that's, I think it's so important to find to find something that speaks to you. And I'd studied with other people besides Stella who didn't think I had anything. But I worked with Stella and she was incredibly supportive and she's very much into imagination, using your imagination and also your background. So you marry the two together. And she didn't believe in like groveling on the floor and remembering when your dog died. She'd say, it's in you. You have that. Just do the work and use your imagination.
Not sense memory.
No. She and Meisner were more about imagination and listening and responding to who's in the room instead of feeling so much.
So what did you get out of USC then that you then took forward and grew from that into Stella Adler?
I was really lucky to be in a bunch of plays there with really good directors like, oh, come on.
Louis Padet.
Oh, yes, Louis. Jack Bender directed us in Moon Children, and he was exceptional as a director, and he does television now. And then working with John Reich, a different type of acting he would teach us from the outside in. So you're physically doing things, and it gets your emotional life going. And so Stella was more, you get something going in you because you've had an experience, and then you use the imagination of the character. For an example, real quick, I was called in to audition for Hawaii Five-0 like that day. And they said the part is the mother her daughter has just been murdered by the boyfriend with a gun. And she's talking about what happened. And I don't have a daughter, and I don't know anyone who's been murdered by a gun, but I have other things I could use my imagination to get to that point, because they wanted tears. And I was in the waiting room for 3 hours crying.
My goodness.
And I had to try to keep it going. And I got the part. But, it's using your imagination so that it's not like, how am I feeling? How am I feeling? It was, how is that character who is like me feeling, and what she went through, and creating the little story that, as Stella would say, and Nina Foch would say, who taught us at USC, what would warm you? What warms you about something or someone, and which makes you connect.
So you have taken bits and pieces of all this and made that your, for lack of a better word, acting style or acting technique.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Was there some point along the way when you woke up and realized, you know what, I am actually pretty good at this. I can do this?
I think it was probably maybe 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
It's, there's always doubt, always doubt.
But doubt is good for art.
I think so.
Artists want to have some doubt. If they're sure of themselves, sometimes then it just becomes, uninteresting.
Right. And I think you stretch yourself. The more doubt you have, the more you have to be prepared and really be solid.
So what do you do then to keep up your acting chops? Do you do a lot of memorization? Do you do scene work? What do you do to regularly develop your craft?
I do. I'll do, like during the pandemic, I did a lot of readings. I'm in a group that reads Shakespeare once a month. We do a group of Shakespeare readings. It's more things on Zoom now, just to keep things fresh. I also, I don't know if you want to get into this, but I was teaching acting for camera in Hawaii. And I found that to be such a fantastic thing for theater actors because you have to be honest. You can't fake anything. And a lot of times when you're doing theater, you, of course, have to magnify so the audience can get it. But if you don't have the kernel of truth in there, it sometimes leaves you cold. And I found that acting for camera taught me and does teach my students to know that they are enough and what they experience is enough. What they're experiencing, the camera wants to see it, and the
Well,
camera's going to come up like that.
the
And
technique is completely different from staging.
completely different.
And you have to bring it all the way down, don't you?
All the way down, but it doesn't mean that you are less. And it took me so long to learn that, Steve. And that's why I teach it, because it's sort of like, don't do what Lisa Barnes did. Here's the tricks to like being a good film actor.
Well, that's what makes a good teacher good, I think, is that you have the experience to teach this is the way it actually works.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Do you enjoy teaching?
I do, except that when I moved to Pennsylvania, I was teaching some online and I found more actor curious people. So it was like they didn't want to read the plays, they didn't want to memorize, they wanted to be influencers or famous. And for me, like I said, it's about the writing, it's the words, it's the
Well, it usually is for someone that's acting in plays. It's all about the words
absolutely.
and how you get that interpretation. When you say acting curious, do you mean wannabe?
Yeah, like, well, let's see how this goes. I think I'd make it. I'd like to do extra work and then be the lead in the next film I look,
So, in other words, they're not serious about being actors yet.
not yet. And so I would, I'd talk about different, like the plays, breaking down a play. There's a teacher, Larry Moss. You know Larry?
I know who Larry Moss is.
Oh
Sure.
gosh, he's wonderful. And I sometimes will audit his classes just because he's so in love with the words and the language and why is Biff named Biff and why is Hap named Hap and what does that have to say about the whole thing of Death of a Salesman. And he just gets into the meat. It's every play is like a fine dining experience with him. And that's what I love about it so much is going into the details of all these characters. I love that so much.
So, if you're going to cook a fine meal, that takes time and effort and energy, doesn't it?
It does, indeed.
And you have to have the right ingredients too.
Yes, absolutely.
So, what would you say is the importance then of young actors in particular having training and then continuing that training throughout a career? Is that super important, do you think?
I think it's really important. And I reached out to a couple of my young friends to find out that one has gone to Tisch and the other one went to Northwestern to find out if they're getting that kind of training there. And of course they are. And they also love theater like I do. But especially the voice. I think for years my voice was a little like, I spoke up here because I was nice and I was from LA and you talk like this. And it was Jim Wilson at USC who just said, Miss Barnes, your voice is down here. And so I was able to like, wow, what a wake up call.
And you then suddenly became John Houseman.
I did. Oh my God, Houseman. I loved him so much. So he would come to New York when I graduated from SC. I didn't even know New York was an island. I knew nothing about it. I knew one person there. And I went out and I, got my two roommates and we lived in Chelsea, and Houseman would come to town and he would call my house and he'd go, Miss Barnes, it's John. Are you fat or thin? And it was like kind of, that's why I left LA, because I couldn't really regulate my weight. And I thought maybe if I just go to New York, they'll like me for my talent.
And you have to walk all the time.
And you have to walk, and so you'll be thin. So anyway.
Well, let's talk about your process of being an actor, an actress. Do you prefer the term actor or actress?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Like when I told my father I wanted to be an actress, he's thinking Lola Falana, you know what I mean? And doing Vegas. And so it had kind of this connotation of not an art form, you know?
Well, some people think that it's a low art when I disagree heartily. I think it's a very high art. So when you begin to work on a role, and aside from reading a script, you got the gig, what is your first approach? How do you start to develop your character? Besides reading the script, what's your first thing?
I want to see where it connects with me. Like, what can I relate to in this character that I can tell their story and get them in my soul. What is it about them? Are they somebody that is frustrated with their love affair? They want to move on, and it's something that I can relate to. And I can relate to a lot of things, Steve, having graduated in 2003. And so it's easy for me now. It's so funny. I was just saying this to somebody the other day, for me to just like read something and find something in almost everything I read, what I can relate to in that character, then build from there. And as soon as I got really good at that, it became harder to memorize.
Why do you think that is?
Because I got older, and I think the older you get and the more experience you get, the more experience you have with life, you can call in like having your heart broken, losing a dog, losing love, being extremely joyful and positive in the world where people think you're crazy because you seem like a lunatic. So I can relate to just about anybody. And so that's where I start. Where's the kernel of that character?
So you have to find something in a role that is in you.
Yeah, that's where I start.
That's where you start. All right. So then what becomes the next big challenge for you? Is it memorization? Is it text? What is it?
No, it's text for sure. Looking at that, so who's talking about me? What are they saying about me? What is that information I'm going to get? What is being said about my character? And then also, where are we? What year are we? What is the dialect? And sometimes the dialect will have a lot of a physical thing that helps me move out of Lisa Barnes to turn into somebody else, which is what I really love doing. I don't like playing Lisa Barnes in anything. So it's finding the differences so finding what we have in common and finding what's different.
Well, maybe one day somebody will write a part that is Lisa Barnes.
Oh, well, that'd be fine.
And you just slide right on and take it.
I take it, yeah.
So, all right. So what are the big challenges to that?
I have this thing where I really want to find a massive truth. It's a thing that I have, like something. What's about this person that is universal that everyone might be able to relate to? If it's something physical about them, how am I going to get them to empathize, even if they're a bad person? How am I going to get them to hear this character's story? That's my job. Is I have to make that person understood for the writer's sake.
So more often than not, I would think throughout a career like yours, you took a part or you got cast in a role, whether you actually pursued it or not. You went and auditioned for it and you got cast, but it wasn't something that you spent a lot of time dwelling on trying to get. You just got cast, correct?
Sometimes, yeah. Then there were a lot of times where I worked really hard to
really
try
hard
to
at
get,
it.
Yeah.
So then what was it about those things that you pursued? Was it something that you recognized in the part that was you, or what was it that you pursued because I want that part?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. I think it was I saw something in me. And I remember when I auditioned to play Joan La Pucelle in Henry VI Part 1 in The War of the Roses, I wanted to play. There was a tomboy thing about her. And even though she worshiped Satan, which I didn't, I could find similarities, but there was a tomboy, and I never really played anything like that before. Somebody who could sword fight and all this. And I was only 26, which means it was like 2003. And I think, so.
You have learned a whole lot in about 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I have. But yeah, so I really wanted that role. And it wasn't anything except that I wanted to be strong, in something.
So then what for you makes a good role good? Is it that that's some kind of intangible, something that just strikes you in your heart, or is there something intellectual about finding it?
I think it's both. And I think like if I've never played Martha in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but I would love to play that part.
Oh, you'd be killer in that.
Well, she's just so complicated, and there's so many levels of like her love and disappointment and fierceness, and so it's a mix. It's a mix.
So you've appeared in both dramas and comedies. Do you have a preference
Oh
for one
yeah,
over the other?
comedies
Why?
because they're harder, and you have to find a truth in them to make them like not slipping on a banana peel funny, but
Hmm.
like a truth that makes what is a universal thing that makes this character humorous. So I do this. I don't know if I should bring this up, but I do this thing. I don't know if I told you about it or sent you anything called Barnes Looks at Barnes.
I've seen many Barnes look at
Oh,
Barnes episodes, and frequently there's some kind of a piece of straw or a broom handle or whatever that
all
you're
right.
using as a microphone. Yes, I know.
Yes, it's not a Rode microphone. It came up a couple years ago when my husband and I were traveling around Northern California, and he's a photographer, and so he's constantly taking pictures and constantly getting his art out. And I was just like drooling in the front seat of the car, and he goes, yeah, we see a barn. I said, wow, that's beautiful. He goes, you should do a series, Barnes Looks at Barnes. And I went, stop the car. And we got out, and I found a feather and did this thing, and it's just it got to a point though where I started to do a little bit of like political stuff in there, but it's just playing different kind of geeky people that without a lot of thought or great accent work. I just got like it's just this personality who stops at Barnes and makes a commentary about what's going on in
Well,
life.
well, it's a little daffy and very funny.
Good. Oh, I'm glad you like it.
If anybody's curious, if the listeners are curious, go search their
Barnes looks at Barnes.
Barnes
Yeah.
looks at Barnes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you approach comedy differently than drama when you prepare?
No, because it's both so serious. It's serious stuff.
You
In a
have to
good,
play it like it's a drama, even though it's going to wind up being funny.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
It's-
are you thrown by laughter then, or is that just a
oh
wonderful
no,
thing?
that's what you want. And that's another thing that one of the things I learned at USC, and also I studied at the Pacific Conservatory of the Performing Arts, is and also Humboldt State of all places, the number one selling and smoking place in the world. And in each of those schools, I learned to read the audience, which is a talent, right, Steve? It's you got to know what's going on. They're coughing, they're moving, they're laughing, there's crying. And that's going on in the background of all the other stuff you've got going on. So you're working with the audience and the other actors in this kind of spiritual thing for me, it's great.
Are you able to keep those distractions out of your performance?
Sometimes. Except I have to tell you, can I tell you a story?
Please.
So I did Equus at USC, right?
I remember I lit it,
I remember you lit it, and you lit it beautifully, thank God.
and I never saw it. That was a show that I came in and I set it up overnight one night, and then I was operating another show in the Bing Theater, and I never saw a single performance
Oh,
of it.
wow. Wow. Um, well, USC was my dad's alma mater, and we were going to a UCLA football game with some of his friends, and we're at the Hilton Hotel there having lunch. And I turned to my dad and I say, Dad, I just got this, lead in a show at USC. And he's going, oh, Lise, that's great. Hey, I'd like to make a toast to my daughter. She just got the lead in what's the show? Equus, Equus. Well, Lise, that's fantastic. You know what we're going to do? We're all going to come opening night. We're going to have a party. We're going to go back to our house and party some more. I'm just so proud of you. Great. Cheers, Lisa. Cheers. I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, I have to take all my clothes off. And he looks at me without a beat and he goes, Lise, whatever happened to Oklahoma? So So that was in like blah, 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 year.
Did you tell him that's where the wind comes sweeping down the plains?
He would have loved you. Um, so then in 1980 something, I did it again at a place called Pennsylvania Stage Company in Allentown.
Wow.
And it was a professional production. And I'm there one night playing opposite a guy from Carnegie Mellon, a wonderful actor, Jeffrey Marcus. And he's playing the boy, and I'm facing the audience, and I take off my top, and there's nothing there, and this guy in the audience goes, "Good night." Like that. I mean, loud. And everybody kind of, ha, 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 ha. And I'm facing the audience and him, the kid, and he's looking at me like, like, oh, he can't, he's laughing. And I'm like very serious, what's the matter? Don't you want to? And, it was, that was one of those times where you just have to keep it together.
You just got to keep forging forward because it's happening and it's live.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So are there differences then in the way that you approach a known role, a part that's in a play that people know, versus something that you're breaking for the first time ever? It's a brand new play.
Oh, that's such a good question. I try really hard to never, well, if I've never seen the play, I don't see the play, and I don't look up online what people have done because I don't think that's.
But what if you've already seen it? What if you know?
If I have seen it, then I just, it's like I have to go into this other kind of realm. That has happened, and I'm trying to think where it has happened. I just go into another, like, it's like a different side of the brain, as if it's a brand new script, and I've never seen it before.
Mm-hmm. You have to treat it just like you've never heard of it before.
Right, exactly.
So every part is a new part to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever played a part again? Well, you did it at Necklace. You've played that part twice. Did you find new things the second time?
Oh, yes. And I also played Nina twice. I did Nina at the Edinburgh Festival with USC, with Casey, actually. And then I did it in Los Angeles. And that's another good story. Opening night, we moved it to a bigger theater, bigger venue because it was going quite well. And I was playing Nina. And opening night, I was helping to produce it. So I knew the LA Times was coming and Dramalog was coming and the LA Weekly was coming. And I was driving in Santa Monica with a friend who had the convertible down, and there were all these police all around. And all of a sudden, he's at a stop sign. He puts up his hands and he goes, "I don't know about you, but every time I see a bunch of cops, I just go, 'Sorry, officer, I'm guilty,' like this." Well, that was a real bad idea. So the cops come and they pull us over, and they're like, I'm like, what happened? And we're at the side of the road, and the guy gets on a megaphone, "Put your hands up." And we're on Santa Monica Boulevard and 20th Street.
Oh, my goodness.
And traffic has stopped in both directions. So it's the only time I've stopped traffic, Steve. So and then he goes, "Put your hands up, the girl too." So I put my hands up. I'm like, what happened? And they go, "The girl, get out of the car." So I open the door from the inside to get out of the car, and they scream, "The girl, open from the outside." And then they kind of arrest me for armed robbery, basically.
What?
And I'm opening that night in the Seagull at this new venue where all the critics are coming, and I'm playing Nina. And so in my head, it's sort of like what you were asking before, do you get distracted? So in my head, I'm thinking, as it back up, get on your knees. I looked at these cops. There were 8 cops with guns pointed at me, and they were terrified.
They were terrified?
They were terrified. And I'm like, oh, this is such an inconvenience. And so I get on my knees and they handcuff me, but I'm thinking in the same time, I'm like, I've been studying a little Buddhism, and be the one who's going to save the sinking ship. These guys are panicking. So they handcuff me, and I say, "What did I do?" And the guy goes, "Shut up and get in the car." And then they put me in the car, and this other cop comes over and he's like, "Are you okay? Do you need the air conditioning on?" I said, "No, I'm fine, but how long is this going to take? I'm opening in a play tonight." Who cares, right? So anyway, they said, I'm not guilty. I get to the theater, it's 5 o'clock, and the director says, I come in, I go, oh my God, I was just picked up for armed robbery. I had 8 guns pointed at me. And the director goes, Lisa, Warren left his shoes in Pasadena. We've got to go to Goodwill. So,
That was much more important, is missing shoes,
yeah, right.
than the fact that you might have been missing entirely.
Entirely, yeah. So to answer your question, yeah, I think you get better as you get older, and you dream about those characters.
Well, I certainly hope you get better as you get older. It would be kind of silly if you didn't, or you really weren't into it. Anybody that cares gets better over time. I think that's nature.
Right.
Once you've opened a show and you're in a run of a show, what do you do to continue to keep it fresh?
It's such a good question, and it's so important. You think everybody in the audience deserves to have the best show ever. So do not scrimp. Don't hold back. Just this is a new show every day, and it also makes it more fun because gives you more to do because you're playing more because you're playing.
Are you looking to learn as you're going?
Sometimes, yeah. But kind of, it's almost like the lines, everything, where you're headed with it, but you're able to like kind of be in the moment and ride the waves. It's like surfing, really. It's, you don't have to think about how do I look or what's this. It's like I look at your eyes and what you're doing to me and what you're saying to me. And is it working today? And if it's not, then I adjust. But every audience member deserves the best performance you can give.
Well, and they're seeing it for the first time mostly. Sometimes people are seeing it multiple times, but most people are seeing it for the first time. And they're seeing, each one of those people in a live performance are seeing a unique performance that will never be replicated.
Exactly.
It's not like a movie where it gets exactly replicated every time. These people are seeing something that's very different in certain ways every single time you perform it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk to you about directors and directing, because you've worked for directors and you've also directed your own things. What would you say are the most important lessons you've taken away from working with your favorite directors?
Oh, kindness.
Kindness.
Kindness. I swear, there are people out there that are crazy. I did this episode, I won't say what it was because he's probably listening, but no, he's not. I don't even know if he's still alive because this was before 2003.
No names are necessary. Well, you were just a baby.
I was just a baby, but he was screaming, and this is in the year, it was 1990. So it's when one scene would take all day long to shoot because you had so many different angles, you had tons of crew, you had this and that, and I played an undercover waitress, and a guy was hired that morning to play an undercover busboy. And this director treated that guy so badly. And I've seen this in directors sometimes. They will just have a whipping boy in the show that is a way that they let out their own anxiety. And it was really hard. And at one point he said to me, I was giving an actress her dinner, and we had to go back to one, and she'd taken a bite out of this salmon or whatever. He screamed, "Fix the salmon," to me. And I went, "It's not my job." Oh! And after the thing was over, I thanked him for hiring me. And he said, "You're a very good professional. And thank you. You did a great job."
Wow.
So, but he was just, you don't
there's no need for it.
There's no need for it. And the best way you get anything out of a student or an actor is to let them know they know what they're doing. Give them that confidence. And if they're going offline or if they're going into a different realm that isn't working for the show, find what works. Say, I'm seeing what this is doing, and I think where you're headed, so that you're making the actor feel like they're a collaborative person, not that you're judging them.
Well, it is a collaboration.
It is, but a lot of directors, not a lot, I don't know. I think, and this is another thing too, Steve, I think that I've noticed throughout the 30 years that I've been doing, 30, 40 years I've been doing this.
Since 2003.
Since 2003, is that also actors, the actors used to get away with being really rakes, to work with. And not anymore. People don't want to put up with it because we don't need that. You don't need that in a
Well,
working environment.
society has pushed a lot of that
Yeah,
toward people taking possession of their own being and not being pushed around by other people.
exactly, exactly.
Is there anything you do now differently in working with directors than when you started out? Do you approach the act of working with a director differently?
You know what I think I do more now is and this is a huge thing for anyone getting started or even in the process of acting. I don't look for approval. I don't put that on them. It's a big, big thing. And I think, actors are children and there is that side where we need to know that mom and dad think we're doing well. And I think it's a burden on the director. I know it is. And so I try to just do my job. I love talking to directors so much, but I'm not needy like I was, I think.
When you first started out, you needed that approval in order
Oh
to
God,
give
Steve.
yourself a sense that you were in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, when your dad thinks that you're going into a career because you want to be a stripper in Las Vegas, and you're like, but,
When you're in rehearsal, which is more likely to be something you're dealing with in a play than in a television show where you
Mhm.
get limited, if any, rehearsal, right?
Right, right.
So you just walk in there, they've cast you for who you are and what you're able to do, and you better come in and know your part and hit your marks and move along because nobody's really going to rehearse real hard with you. But in a play, you're going to rehearse for weeks usually. What is it you're looking for in a rehearsal period? What do you want?
I think what I need in the rehearsal period is to work the lines along with the blocking and the relationship. So it's like many things at once. So it's a lot. And I really try not to be hard on myself because I'm asking for so many things. I look at every time I do a role is akin to the way my mother, who is a fine artist, who was a fashion illustrator and had to become a medical illustrator when she turned 50. And she is one of the top medical illustrators in the world
Hmm.
and works for the top surgeon. She taught herself and she taught it. She's colon rectal. There are a lot of jokes there, but she's colon rectal and she didn't know anything about any of this. And so she did her own homework and she talked to the doctor. And a lot of the times the doctor didn't have any time to help her through things. But it's like she gets into this, this world so she can understand every aspect of it and make sure she's drawing specifically. So this is rehearsal for me. It's like pat your head, pat your stomach, tripping over your shoes. That's me. I'm a
You have
total
to be
mess.
you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And part of the problem is you may not know what you're doing for a while.
Yes. Yes.
So that's why you're rehearsing. You're trying to figure it out.
Right. And also figure out which technique is going to help me more with this role. Is it more outside in or inside out?
For the listeners who don't know, explain that.
Okay, inside out, real fast was inside out is coming from your emotional reality. Like, I've lost my son, and so how does that affect me? How does it affect my lines? How does it affect my relationship to the people in the room? If I'm playing somebody who has a tick, how does that affect the way I relate to people and it makes my need to communicate more. So doing this when somebody has a tick and they stammer, they need to communicate and it makes they're getting over a conflict within themselves. And sometimes that's a really helpful thing to do. Find something physical that helps you make it another character, not you.
Well,
So
a lot of directors like to stage things in a way that gives actors physical things to do.
right, right. And that's
And
kind of nice.
and in a way, it takes the onus off of the actor having to come up with everything themselves, and you're not just saying the words, you actually are doing something.
Right, right.
I think
Yeah.
that's really important for actors is that they have some sense of what it is they're doing in space.
Oh, absolutely. And two things about that. One is I love table work where you just sit down and you read the play and you read the scenes and you talk about it and you talk about your own experiences. I find that really helps actors anchor to characters. I did a show up in Maine where we did that Dinner with Friends, fabulous play. And we would just sit around talking about our relationships, then read. And then I think we didn't start blocking till like week 3. Um, so it's one way to do it when you're talking and you're talking about emotional things and psychological
And do
stuff.
you think that talking and talking before you got to blocking was helpful?
Yeah, because I had more of an idea who I was in the room. Like, am I frightened? Am I a frightened person? Am I skittish? Am I hyper? Am I manic? A little upset, a little concerned. My marriage might be on the line. But also working with John Reich at USC, and he would say, just step, 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 say the line like this. I'm sorry, Daddy, like this. And then he would say things. Have you ever noticed that when somebody's lying, their pitch gets higher? I love you, Daddy. Or I won't be a bad girl. It's like they're like, I won't be a bad girl. It was kind of interesting. So I learned some real interesting physically and vocally through him.
Do you think that part of that is that you're actually socializing with the other actors, so now you're really getting to know them too?
Yes, yeah. And that's really great. It's just great.
Because
Actors are
then you start to
awesome.
act as an ensemble, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. And you know each other and you trust each other and you realize that everybody's got your back.
Can you share any experiences in which you were really struggling to figure something out and you weren't sure how to handle the notes that you were getting and it was just not working? What did you do? Maybe you disagreed totally with the notes. How did you handle that? What do you do?
So this was a life-changing experience I had at USC working with Jack Bender in Moon Children. I played Shelley, and Shelley's a little like, half of her brain is missing. She's just a little ditzy. And I couldn't find her. I was doing this thing where she was kind of cutesy, but it wasn't real, and it didn't work for me. And Jack, instead of like saying, it's not working, he'd come up and he would just lean over and I'd lean over with him and we'd both just start just looking at each other and he'd go, hand him a flower when you get to that door. Okay. So, and then I say, my first line is Norman here. So that I give him this flower in this weird timing way and say, is Norman there? And all of a sudden I found that Shelley is kind of living in quicksand. And it really gave me a physical thing and a voice thing and a real thing. And he was very nice about it, Jack. And, that's back in the days when you're at USC and people are having the people from the coast are coming to see the show. So good luck tonight. You're going to have a career. It was one of those kinds of shows because he knew a lot of people. But I just felt so, blessed to be in that piece. And that was like, 1,000 years ago. But it taught me a lot and it changed my life.
You need to have that and other experiences like that as stepping stones along the way. What I
Yes.
think of as epiphanies. You're having an epiphany about it's not what I've been doing or how I've been doing it. Wait a minute, it's something else. It's this.
Right.
It's a big deal for in the arts, isn't it?
It's huge. And it's also, and it's something that's truthful as well. That's what I mean about it. I'm not doing a caricature before I was.
And so
And
you've also done a whole bunch of directing and or a certain amount of directing
right.
and do you enjoy it? Do you find it very challenging? Is it easy for you?
I love it. I'm more of like a, kitchen sink drama kind of director.
What does that mean?
It just kind of, I like psychology, the psychology in the high, simple play. I like Odette's and I like Inge and I like the old classics. But also I like, yeah, I like psychological stuff, like where you're dealing with the psychology of the
So
characters.
when you have an actor in a part and you're directing
Mhm.
them and they're
Mhm.
not getting it, what do you do?
Again, I try to, I'll go, that isn't working for you, is it? This is something I learned from Jack Bender too. This isn't working for you, is it? And you're like, no, it's not, as a matter of fact, you know? And So what can we do? What is it that's going on? Well, I just feel like I'm pushing it too much. Just say the line. Just try saying it. Just say it. Don't put anything on it. See what that's like. And sometimes that's all you need to do is say the line. It doesn't have to have the meat that everything else.
David Mamet, whatever you think of David Mamet, he loves
Mhm.
to talk about actors should say lines uninflected. There should be no inflection.
When we did Sexual Perversity in Chicago at the Edinburgh Festival, we stopped to see American Buffalo at the West End. And we went back to meet the actors afterwards. And we said, "What did you do?" They said, "We just ran lines." That's all. That's all we did. We just ran lines. We didn't do anything else. It was brilliant.
Well, that's his particular approach. Is that I'm sure he doesn't mean that in performance it's uninflected, other than, but certainly when you're working the part, you come at it and you memorize it uninflected, which also
Right.
leads me to ask you about memorization, which is a big part of acting.
Oh God.
I assume that at this point, no matter how hard you work at it, you're actually pretty good at it, that you know how to memorize lines. Do you have a
Mhm.
technique or a trick that helps you remember lines?
I have this thing called color synesthesia. Have you ever heard of it?
I have.
So words have colors. And
Wow.
so I'm able to, it helps me so much now. I mean, it used to be nothing. And, people would go, you do a whole Shakespeare play and they go, "How did you learn the lines?" And you'd be like, "But what about the character?" And now it's like, holy heck, I'm memorizing a 5-minute monologue for a little thing I'm doing here. And it's like, my God. Um,
You're seeing the colors in the words.
See the colors in the words, like, oh, the orange word comes up next, which is now. Now I'm not seeing da 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 da. So I'll remember the line starting with something and the idea starting with that. So that helps. Also, what am I trying to get across? So I have to know what I'm trying to do and get back. It all has to be in me. And I have to repeat the lines a lot to get them in my mouth. So I'm not having to overthink and just be.
So there's a bit of brute force to it. It's just doing it over and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that. That's part of it.
And do you find that that becomes boring after a while, or does it get more interesting?
Your voice gets a little hoarse, but it can be interesting. It's more boring. It is. It's the boring part for me, but and it's the hardest part for me. Like I said, you finally learn how to make a fabulous character, and you can't learn the words. But I haven't had a problem with that.
So we touched on distractions, like distractions in a live audience earlier, but I am curious. Motion picture sets, motion picture and TV sets are notoriously busy, distracting places, and you have to be in it while all this other stuff is going around. And sometimes it's chaos, sometimes it's more orderly, but a lot of the times it's noisy and people are milling around and yelling at each other and all the rest of it. What do you do to eliminate those distractions so that when they call action, you're in it? What do you do?
Okay, so I was in this TV show called Rescue Me, and they were filming a scene where I have a scene with my boyfriend who has cheated on me, and so I also have a scene with another scene before that. So I didn't get the script until the day I shot it, and I didn't sleep the night before, like midnight, and so I was up all night trying to learn the lines, and the next day they said, "We're going to shoot you right away." And I was like trying to remember the words, and they didn't shoot until 6 o'clock. So I'm trying to keep the words, but I haven't slept for a day and a half. And I get on the set and I do the little scene finally. And then we're in this little house, a little room in the house. There are like 50 guys there doing crew. And I have to walk toward my boyfriend and slap him and crying. So they shot his point of view first, and I'm walking toward him and I'm sobbing. And the director says, "Lisa, save it." And I said, "There's more where that came from." And it's only because I knew I was going to be replaced. They kept on giving this guy new girlfriends in the show, and I knew somebody else was going to replace me. And I was so devastated. So I literally stood in the middle of the room while the crew is all running, fussing around, like holding my hands over my eyes so that I could just get into that moment. You just have to find your own space.
You
know?
actually physically blocked it out.
I did. Yeah.
So it wasn't just a mental block out, it was physical. You actually covered up your eyes and probably
Yeah.
covered your ears somewhat, and you just weren't hearing it and not seeing it.
Right.
Interesting. What is your technique for being what most actors try to achieve all the time of being in the moment?
Oh, wow. Oh, sometimes you just stop and breathe and watch what other people are doing and just take a breath before responding. Because that's what we do in life, And I find that also to be pretty powerful. But I really strive to be in the moment when I'm in a play, and having somebody who's there with you that you can trust is, I have worked with people that have decided exactly how they're going to do the part. So they're not playing with you. And
That's got to be hard.
it's hard. So I was supposed to be in love with that character. I let my frustration toward him, the rage I had for the actor, come out as passion. So,
Well, if that works, if it's what you need for the role,
yeah.
but it's about, I think it's all about taking it from the other performer or performers.
Yeah.
And if they're not giving it to you, boy, that's really hard.
Then you have to imagine what it is that you're getting. You have to look at that face and go, it's like playing somebody like opposite that you just are not attracted to at all. You got to find something,
Well, yeah, you have to search for it, don't you?
Yeah.
And you don't want to search for it. You really want it to just be there.
It's fun, but you know what, Steve? I've had that happen with playing with two different actors in the same play. One I had an attraction to, which made it easy, and the other one I wanted to kill. And people would say that I was better with the one I wanted to kill. So I don't know. What do I know?
You were cutting the one that you wanted to hang with. You were
Right.
cutting him a break, or her a break. I don't know whether it's him or her, but you were cutting them a break. But the
Right.
one that you wanted to kill, you were coming at.
Yeah.
I've been having the most fun conversation with Lisa Barnes for a little more than an hour now, and we're going to wind the show down a bit. And so I'm just wondering, in all of your experiences, you've already told us a ton of really great, funny, wonderful stories, and you've been around a while and you've met people, and at least since 2003, we know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a story that you can share with us that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just hilarious?
So I was doing a backers audition. I did Awake and Sing. I think I may have mentioned to you, probably for 20 years. I started in a production in Los Angeles, and it went so well. And we had such great actors working with us on it. Orson was in it. Richard Fancy was in it. We ended up, the director loved it so much, she wanted to try to move it to Broadway. And I had moved to New York, and I had been playing a 24-year-old back in the 90s. And here it's 2003, and here I am playing a 24-year-old again. And so we did a backers audition at Primary Stages for the Schuberts, for a lot of people. And I played opposite Josh Brolin. Ari Gross was in it. Ed Asner was in it. And it was just so much fun, and it was just great. And we would rehearse up at the Schubert organization. They let us use their space. And Jerry Schoenfeld, who was the president of the Schubert organization, came up to me after the show one night. He said, "I'd like to take you down and have you meet Bernadette Peters." And I said, "Oh, that'd be great." And so we go down there, and he introduces us to Bernadette Peters. And he said, "And this is Lisa Barnes. Why did you change your name?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't change my name." He goes, "Yes, you did. Your name's Lisa Greenberger. What, are you afraid? Ashamed of your people?" And I said, "No, honestly, I'm Lisa Barnes. Look at this punim." He goes, "I look like a leprechaun." He goes, "Well, I don't know about that." Anyway, we had the best time, and I have a lot of stories about him. But the one thing was after we did the backers audition, we went to this really beautiful romantic restaurant, about 15 of us, and Josh Brolin and I were telling stories and imitating people I was imitating somebody in particular, a Broadway actress who has a voice that's very dissonant, and the owner of the restaurant came over and told us we had to leave. And I was horrified. I'd never been kicked out of a restaurant before. But, it was with Josh Brolin, so that was fine.
Well, that helps assuage it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it does a little bit.
So,
Yeah.
last question for you today,
Yeah.
Lisa. You've already given us just an enormous amount of advice along the road here, but I'm wondering, do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to those who are starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to get to the next level?
I'd say, and I tell this all the time, take classes, find people that are really good, even if you're scared to death, find the good teachers, find a community in the classes, and it could be at your school. If you went to SUNY something or USC, find a community and help each other out. That's one way to keep a group together. Another thing is to do a lot of student films,
That's a really good idea.
because you get the experience, and you don't have to make a mess of yourself during doing a public professional gig.
I've been doing this show for quite some time, and no one's ever made that suggestion before. That's a really good suggestion.
Really good, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, because you really have an opportunity to not only get some footage of yourself, but also probably, unless they've put you in a major starring part of some kind, you're not going to really get damaged too hard if in fact you're not great in it.
No, and it's such a great experience because they're learning too. And a lot of times you're getting, like I did one at Columbia thesis. So we had Milos Forman. Was it? Yeah, Milos Forman was the dean, and he worked on a scene. You just never know. Especially at the university, they really do need actors. I found this in Hawaii. I tell everybody to do student films because people there were using their auntie, and things like this. And it only helps the community get better if everybody's using each other and helping each other out. That's huge. And
Well,
it's
it is huge. And again, going back to what we said earlier, it is a business of collaboration. It's not a singular business. Your mom is in a business where she works by herself making art. But actors, actresses, directors, producers, writers work alone, but then they have to be able to collaborate with everyone else.
right.
So it is a business of collaboration. So what you're saying is very, very valuable, in that people need to learn to be in that group environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really works. Lisa Barnes, what a lot of fun to have you on the show today. I'm so pleased and proud to have you on the show, and thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Oh, God love you. Thank you so much, Steve.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.